Far away from the daily headlines, there's this silent but really intense diplomatic showdown happening every single day in the stormy waters of the South China Sea. And this isn't just about ships and little islands, it's a high stakes mind game, a real test of a nation's resolve against historic threats to its sovereignty. So, with all this pressure building on an incredibly complex geopolitical chessboard, the big question is, how is Vietnam actually navigating these choppy waters to protect its own interests and, try to maintain peace? Let's break it down. This silent confrontation is all happening in what the Vietnamese call the Bien Dong, and it's a test of wills that's playing out not just on the water, but in diplomatic corridors and legal forums all around the globe. It's a battle of strategy, of endurance, and really of national identity. To really get what's going on, we first have to understand why this specific part of the ocean is so incredibly important to so many different countries. So let's dive in. Why is the sea so stormy? The scale here, it's just staggering. This isn't some small regional spat. We're talking about roughly a third of all global maritime trade passing right through these waters. That makes it a vital artery for the entire world's economy. But for Vietnam, the stakes are way more personal. They are, frankly, existential. This sea is a critical space for their survival. It's their gateway to the world, and it's tied directly to their national security. But at the end of the day, it's about something they consider sacred, their sovereignty. And the whole situation has turned into a global hotspot, really fueled by two big things. First, China's increasingly assertive actions, like building and militarizing artificial islands. And second, the intense strategic rivalry between the United States and China, which, let's be honest, casts a huge shadow over the entire region. Now, to understand how Vietnam is responding, we've got to decode China's strategy first. Beijing is using this multi-layered approach that's designed to change the facts on the ground without ever starting a full-blown war. So let's take a look at their playbook. Okay, first up is the gray zone strategy. This is all about coercive actions that are deliberately planned to stay just below the line of what you'd call an act of war. So think of things like Coast Guard vessels and maritime militias harassing other countries' fishing boats or blocking their supply ships. The whole point is to intimidate and assert control without ever firing a shot. The recent high-profile tensions we've all seen between China and the Philippines are a textbook example of this strategy in action. The second tactic is what's called salami-slicing. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's about changing the map one tiny slice at a time. International watchdogs have used satellite data to document this relentless process. Dredging sand, building airstrips, installing military-grade radar systems on these artificial islands, slowly but surely turning them into fortified outposts that project constant pressure. So the question is, how does a country like Vietnam counter this kind of multifaceted pressure? Well, not passively, that's for sure. Instead, Hanoi has put into practice this really sophisticated and proactive foreign policy that's become known as bamboo diplomacy. This quote right here, it gets to the absolute heart of the idea. The metaphor of bamboo is deeply, deeply resonant in Vietnamese culture, and it's a brilliant way to describe a foreign policy that is principled at its core, incredibly strong in its resolve, but also highly adaptable in how it's carried out. This whole strategy is really built on three core pillars, just like a bamboo plant. We're going to look at each one. The strong roots of its core principles, the sturdy trunk of its national strength, and, of course, the flexible branches of its diplomatic skill. First, let's talk about the strong roots. These are the non-negotiables. Vietnam's absolute, unwavering defense of its sovereignty. In practice, this means lodging strong diplomatic protests against every single violation. It also means taking defensive action. In fact, international reports have confirmed Vietnam has been upgrading its own outposts in the Spratlys, sending a very clear message that it won't be pushed around. Next up is the sturdy trunk. This is all about building strength from the inside out, so modernizing their navy and their coast guard to create a credible deterrent. But at the exact same time, Vietnam consistently champions international law, using the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, which is often called the Constitution for the Oceans, as its legal shield against anyone's unilateral claims. And finally, we have the flexible branches. And this is really where the art of diplomacy comes into play. Vietnam has been building this dense web of partnerships with major powers, the US, China, Russia, India, making sure it's never too dependent on any one single ally. Regionally, it works with an ASEAN to try and negotiate a binding code of conduct for the sea. And here's the crucial part. Even while it's pushing back,
It always keeps the lines of dialogue open with China to manage disputes. It's a complex but fascinating philosophy of cooperate and struggle.
So, looking down the road, the situation is going to stay incredibly complex. What does the future actually hold for this geopolitical mind game?
What we're seeing is this constant geopolitical tug of war. On one side, the pressure is immense. The US-China rivalry keeps heating up, and China's assertive actions, well, they show no signs of stopping. But on the other side, there are some powerful balancing forces at play. Vietnam's bamboo diplomacy is actually proving to be quite effective. More global powers are getting actively involved, and the push for international law as the basis for stability is getting stronger and stronger.
And what's so important to remember is that Vietnam's struggle isn't happening in a vacuum. Its goals, peace, stability, freedom of navigation, these are shared interests with the wider international community. And that alignment gives them a vital source of diplomatic support.
In the end, this entire complex diplomatic chess match is driven by a really profound sense of national purpose. It's a long and challenging journey for sure, but it's one that's guided by a clear, powerful idea that upholding that sacred flame of sovereignty is a historic mission for the whole nation.